Good luck to everyone. Audience is coming.
I was always interested in issues of poverty, of course, growing up and seeing a lot of things that didn't quite make sense or didn't quite seem right. Then I found myself, doing a lot of philosophical reading and thinking about issues, and always found myself seeing the link between poverty and agriculture and also opportunities within agriculture. And there's when I began to actually go deeper and study, my passion, which was understanding how smallholders in sub-Saharan Africa make decisions and what obstacles they face that actually prevent them from being able to move themselves out of poverty. So I started studying theories of poverty traps and poverty dynamics. I did my fieldwork in rural Ethiopia, actually. So I think all my current research still links back to my kind of initial interest as to why some people don't seem to be able to actually move out of poverty despite the seemingly opportunities that are out there. So, I mean, in my little time that I've interacted with farmers like in Ethiopia, and then, of course, talking with farmers in Nigeria, you know that they're amongst the smartest people that I know anyway, and they're always making the best with the resources that they have available. So many times I think we just want to ask basic questions as to why are they not doing this, and not just assume that, oh, they're not just adopting this thing even though it's good for them, but actually have we asked and checked, really, is it actually good for them? Does it actually make sense for them? Are there constraints that prevent them from being able to succeed in it? So we talk about opportunities maybe in aquaculture or the poultry value chain, and it looks like it should be, because these are things that you should be able to get into easily. But you don't have electricity, so you can't invest in a freezer, or if you want to invest in a freezer, you have to think about the cost of the generator and the diesel. Then all of a sudden, those are additional costs, which now makes you just sell at whatever price is available, or not even go into broiler production at all.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series on May 7th.
Welcome to the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science seminar series. There is interpretation available in Spanish, French, and Hindi. To access interpretation, you choose the language of your preference by clicking the translation button at the base of your Zoom screen. The seminar will be recorded and made available on the CIMIT YouTube. We invite you to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and social media using the hashtag Women in Science for the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science seminar series. On the screen, you can see the QR code that will give you access to Slido for submitting questions and comments to be addressed in the Q&A session. We will be hearing today from an inspiring economist and a smallholder engagement specialist, Dr. Saweda Liverpool-Tasie, Michigan State University Foundation Professor of Agricultural, Food and Resource Economics. Liverpool-Tasie will have a conversation with Mercy Bugua, who is a seed systems specialist at CIMIT, doing research on developing the demand side of formal and informal cereal seed systems, as well as market intelligence to inform breeding. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Brian Goberts, Director General of CIMIT, to officially open the event and introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Saweda Liverpool-Tasie. Dr. Goberts, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome once again to a Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science webinar. At CIMIT, a year and a half ago, we launched a TED Talk meets Fireside Chat style series on women leaders because we are convinced that you can't be what you can see. And we want more women leaders in our science institutions. And to achieve that goal of broader representation, we need to provide more opportunities to hear from women leaders, life journeys, lessons, and insights. Therefore, in each seminar, a share of CIMIT itself chats, discusses reflects together with a catalyst of change women leader. And today we have a true catalyst of change. We have for you Saweda Liverpool-Tasie as our 19th already catalyst of change speaker. She is an MSU Foundation professor and a visiting scientist with the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, or our sister organization IITA, in Abidan, Nigeria. Her research focuses on emerging issues related to smallholder productivity and welfare within dynamic and transforming food markets in sub-Saharan Africa and alongside poorly functioning markets in the region. She's particularly interested in how the transformation of food systems in Africa is creating livelihood opportunities for Africans along the food value chain. She is a member of the Board for International Food and Agricultural Development and the lead principal investigator for 2 projects related to African food systems transformation. One with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and another one that is funded by USAID and the Nigerian Agricultural Policy Activity. I'm sure that we will enjoy and learn a lot from Saweda's outstanding leadership experience. Without further introduction, therefore, give a warm welcome to our 19th Catalyst of Change women leader. Over to you.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And again, I'll also just say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. It is truly an honor to be part of the CIMIT seminar series about women leaders in science and to be the 19th. So this is an exciting opportunity. I think many times we go through our lives just trying, every day, just trying to get things done in our work, in our lives generally. And we don't spend enough time, I think, reflecting on our journey. And all of a sudden, it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years have passed. And so I thank you for inviting me to be part of this series and to reflect on my journey as an African agricultural economist focus on Africa's food systems transformation. And I think a nice description was given about my research interests in sub-Saharan Africa. So I won't say much now, but maybe later in the course of the conversation. So I thought that I would start by talking about who I am. Who is Saweda Liverpool-Tasie? Right, so all of you know that I'm an applied economist, and I'm an agricultural economist in the Department of Agricultural, Food, and Resource Economics at Michigan State University in Michigan, United States of America, and currently a visiting scientist at IITA, your sister organization based in Ibadan, Nigeria. But that's just part of my identity. I have multiple elements of who I am that are extremely important to me and are important determinants of the decisions that I make every single day about how I use my time. So the first is that I'm a mother and a wife. So I've been married to my husband for 14 years. I have a very supportive husband and 2 amazing children who are a source of inspiration to me and key determinants of the decisions that I take every single day and what encouraged me to strive to continue to be as excellent as I can be, to be my best every single day. In addition to being a mother and a wife, I'm also a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, and I'm a friend. And each of these parts of my identity are extremely important because I need to ensure that I have time for all these different facets of my identity, but because I need to be there for these friends and family, but also because I need them. They're extremely instrumental in me being able to then have the energy and the passion and the strength to do what I do. But I'm also African. I'm Nigerian, I'm Sierra Leonean, and I'm also an individual who's passionate about certain things. For example, I love to do field work. I love to go out there and talk with farmers, with transporters, wholesalers, retailers, understanding why they do what they do, so that when I'm analyzing my data and coming up with policy recommendations for policymakers or donors, I'm able to understand really the numbers that I'm analyzing. I have a better sense of the context and the people that I'm trying to describe in my work. I'm also passionate about capacity strengthening with young scholars. And so that's a picture of me with a set of young scholars that I worked with over a period of 2 to 5 years under one of my projects. So this is Saweda. Saweda has multiple dimensions and multiple things that are extremely critical to her, and sort of provide the scenario within which she's making all her decisions as a scientist and also as a member of different groups in her life. So I thought that before I go into talking about my personal journey, I'd just talk a little bit about my field of agricultural economics. And to do this, I'm going to be drawing from 2 recent articles. One is an article by Uffett and McCluskey, and another by Hilsenroth and co-authors. And both of these were looking at female representation in the field of agricultural economics. And one of the statistics that was cited in the paper by Uffett and McCluskey is the fact that out of all ag-econ PhDs in the US, a third are gotten by women. Now, our field actually compares to the broader field in the sense that we have lower share of women. So in the broader agricultural sciences, they cite 44% in terms of the number of females who are getting PhDs in broader agricultural science. But what is really interesting is what happens when you start looking at how we move when we go up the ranks. So by the time you get to tenured professors in American universities with research positions like mine, then the numbers are quite different and quite, maybe not so encouraging. So first, their statistics show that only about 20% of full professors in American universities are female. If you now look at the minorities within that group, then you have only about 11% of the full professors with research positions that are minorities. If you now take minority females, then you now go less than 5%. And when you talk about Black or African, then I think that is even rare. As I sit today, I don't really know of any other African female ag-econ full professor in a US university in a research position like mine. So this is just to say that they're rare. Doesn't mean that they don't exist, but I'm not aware of any. So now I want to move on to talk about my path. So here on the screen, I have focused on my post-PhD career, but I'll just spend 2 minutes to talk about Saweda before getting to her PhD. So Saweda grew up in a town called Jos in Plateau State, Nigeria, which is in the central part of Nigeria and on the plateau. Beautiful weather. I went to primary school there, and I went to an American international school. And then I went to a Nigerian Baptist middle school. And then I went to a Nigerian Catholic high school. And then I went on to study economics at the University of Jos, also in Jos Plateau State, Nigeria. And I got a Bachelor of Science in Economics. And that was the first step to me realizing about my interests. And one of the things that I learned from taking various courses in economics was that I didn't like macroeconomics very much. I wasn't interested in talking about interest rates or inflation per se in the broad sense of things. But what I was really fascinated with was why people made the decisions that they did. Why did farmers make the decisions about what they did with their land in the way that they did? Why did business people, small businesses, a seamstress, why did she make decisions about how she used her time in designing and sewing an outfit for a child or an adult or a customer of a different kind of, income group, for example. So I was just really fascinated with the decisions being made by individuals and businesses. And so I also loved microeconomics and some of the math that went along with it. And so that was my path. And then I left Nigeria in 2001, and I went to the US, where I started my career in international development. I got 2 master's degrees, one in international development and the other in urban and regional planning in Iowa in the US. And in both of those, I was looking at issues of international development and poverty. And I did look a little bit around women and male decisions. And then I moved on to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I got my PhD in agricultural and consumer economics, also focused on international development and policy. And throughout this journey, I continued to develop this interest in why individuals and businesses make the decisions that they do. And I began to gather the tools that I thought I would need, or not that I thought, but that were required for me to be able to pursue a career in applied economics. After I graduated from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 2009 with my PhD. I took up a postdoctoral fellow position with the International Food Policy Research Institute. That's another sister organization to CIMIT. And I was based in Abuja, Nigeria between 2009 and 2012. And then in January of 2012, I moved to Michigan State University, and I took up a position as an assistant professor with a tenure track position. And I was an assistant professor between 2012 and 2018. During that period, many things happened, but two that I think are key for our discussion today. The first was that I was raising two young children. I moved to Michigan with a 6-month-old baby, that was my son. And then a year later in 2013, I had my daughter whilst I was on the tenure clock. Also, during this period of being an assistant professor, I had the opportunity and I took on the management of a $12.5 million research project starting in 2015. When I sit back and I reflect, I'm not sure exactly how I did it. I'm going to share some of what my journey was like, but this was an extremely challenging time trying to manage these two things because each of them in and of itself is a daunting task for a tenure track faculty, but then to do them together, I think was quite a challenge. Then in 2018, I got tenure and I was promoted to an associate professor. And I was an associate professor in the same department between 2018 and 2022. And then in 2022, I was promoted to full professor. And then later that same year in 2022, I was named an MSU Research Foundation professor in recognition of my work on Africa's food systems transformation. So this is sort of the journey that I took rising the ranks as a US academic, being a Nigerian, Sierra Leonean, African agricultural economist. So how was I able to do it? I think today's conversation is sort of a reflection on our paths and our journeys. It's my journey. So it's just me sharing how I did it. I think that I want to start or think about this from two perspectives. One is sort of the foundation that I had and how it enabled me or changed my worldview and view of how and what I could do. And then I'll also talk about a few practical steps that I had to take as well. So how was I able to do it and the issue of foundation? I had a strong foundation set for me by my family and particularly my parents. This is a picture from them many, many years ago. They are much older now. My father is a retired professor of mathematics from the University of Jos. And my mother is a retired teacher, and she was the vice principal of her school, both of them a Catholic boys' school in Jos. Now, three things I think were extremely critical about the foundation that my family and my parents laid for us children that were key to who I am. The first was that you must work hard. There was no doubt about it. There was no discussion. It was just an expectation, and you had no choice, but you had to work hard. The second thing was that it doesn't matter if you are a boy or a girl. And the third thing was that you can do it. I never had a time when I felt that there wasn't something I couldn't do if I set my mind to it. And what I think was extremely important about the foundation that my parents laid was that it wasn't something about what they said, but it was more by what they did, by what they demonstrated to us, their expectations of us. So for example, my father was a professor of mathematics, but he also led the University of Jos in developing its first strategic plan. My mother was a teacher of literature and English, but she also rose to become the vice principal of the school that she was teaching in. The second thing was that my parents didn't tell us that girls do this and boys do that. No. And they didn't actually allow that. We said that I'm a girl and I will do this or I won't do this. So for example, I have very clear memories of early on in my life, my brother, who's the first of the three of us, baking cakes and also icing some of my birthday cakes when I was 7 or 8, 6 or 7. He also can cook. Similarly, my sister and I, we also washed my dad's car. There wasn't an excuse that you're a girl. We were also very adept in handling our household generator. So if you know Nigeria very well, we have poor electricity supply a lot of the time. And in our town, we did. And so almost all households had a generator. Ours was fuel, used fuel, and you had to crank it up. So you had to be able to pull it up to start the generator. And all of us had to know how to do that. All of us had to know how to change the oil, to put the fuel, and to light the generator. We had to scrub the tires. And there was never a conversation that, okay, girls or boys, no, everybody just did everything that needed to be done in the house. So by just virtue of that environment, we grew up, the expectations were set, and I never doubted that I could do anything that I put my mind to. And I think that was extremely important. Also by the fact that they were both professionals, and my mom got her master's degree while she was married. This all led me to believe, and she had to travel sometimes for it, and my dad would have
Helen,
to take,
checa tu micrófono, por favor, estás muy baja en volumen. Helen, checa tu micrófono.
and my dad would also sometimes have to keep the fort and the home front whilst my mom was doing her master's degree. So all of these, I think, opened up my eyes or created an atmosphere for me that issues around who could do what wasn't really an obstacle that I faced, where I felt like I couldn't achieve things. And I think that was really important for me. Now I want to talk about some of the practical things that I did. And this is just coming out of me reflecting and trying to see if there are some patterns in terms of key characteristics of my journey. So one of the things that I think was kind of the key characteristic of my journey was a situation where I moved from service to leadership. So if I think about it from the perspective of being a researcher, many times I was part of a research team. Certain tasks were given to me. I delivered on those tasks. Certain times opportunities came to take on some more significant leadership role. I took advantage of them, or I accepted those positions. And then eventually I was asked to lead, or I led in a small group, and then I was given a bigger group to lead. So if I think of my job as a researcher, I was asked as an IFPRI researcher to do some studies. And then eventually I was asked to lead and design a study, pull together researchers, conduct research, publish journal articles, and engage with stakeholders like the government and policy makers. And I had to do it, and I did it, and then I found out, okay, I can actually do this. Then I moved to Michigan State University, and I remember being invited to share my ideas about some topics around input supply chains and Sub-Saharan Africa. And I remember being invited to develop one of my ideas that I shared further. They said, would you like to lead a team to do some research on this topic? And I said, sure. And I was given about $700,000 to pull together a research team in Nigeria looking at input supply chains, or the use of inorganic fertilizer, and understand the drivers of its use and its impact on smallholder productivity. I pulled together a team, we collected data, we also leveraged secondary data. We had a capacity strengthening component because I was interested in that. And so I recruited some young PhD students to be part of our team. And then we worked together, and we had a lot of outputs, journal articles, policy briefs, and a lot of presentations with stakeholders. Out of that came the experience that allowed me to then lead the $12.5 million grant that I mentioned, which I led both the design of it and then its implementation. And then I designed a capacity strengthening program that brought young master's and PhD students from Nigeria to Michigan State University to take courses and to be paired with senior scholars to do research, and then to be mentored on how to carry out design research projects, implement them, and disseminate their findings to various stakeholders. Same thing also happened in terms of the roles that I play as an advisory board member in various capacity. One is also on journals. I sit on the advisory board of some journals. I've served as the associate editor for our flagship journal for the International Association of Agricultural Economists. And I got that invitation out of being a reviewer. I started off as being a reviewer for the journal, and then I was invited, and I served for 5 years as an associate editor. Now I sit on the advisory board of several journals. Same thing in terms of my leadership role in various organizations that I've been part of. I was a member, I played some role, I took up some responsibility, and then I was invited to lead, and then I led. So this is sort of my journey. It wasn't always that it was plumped on my lap. No, it started off from serving and working, and then accepting or assuming leadership responsibilities. One thing that I will say that I learned from this is that it's really important for you to reach out and ask others as much as you can. So whenever I'm in a research team, whether I'm a member or a leader, I'm always looking to see why people do what they do. So it's not only about farmers and enterprise owners. I think it's just a principle that I find fascinating, why do human beings do what they do. And so I'm always asking why team leads do what they do. I'm always observing. There's I think that in life, we always will learn from our own experiences, personal experience. Once you are living, you will do things and then you will learn from them. You'll have your own life stories. But many times it is actually less painful to learn from the experience of others, particularly their mistakes. And so even when I read a book or when I listen to a presentation or when I participate in a group, I'm always looking for opportunities to learn. I'm also always asking questions of others. And I think that this is an extremely important way for you to learn how to be a good team member, but also how to lead. Another reflection on my journey is that often it was a lonely path. So I mentioned about the fact that when I was rising the ranks as a Nigerian or African agricultural economist going through the tenure track system of an American university, I didn't have many like me to learn from and to guide me as I went through that process. On one hand, I think that this meant that I took the hard way a lot of times. Now that I'm older and maybe a little bit wiser, I think that there are some decisions I made that were unnecessarily hard on myself. But at the same time, I think that the plus of it was I had to find my own path, and I was able to do that. And I feel quite comfortable right now in my own skin with who I am. And I feel much more empowered now to actually guide others who are coming behind me so that maybe they don't have to have as difficult a path or a journey as I did. So there's always the upside of down. And I think that it was a lonely path, but it's a path that I think I'm grateful that I was able to take. Oftentimes, taking this lonely path means that you are alone, and oftentimes you're also invited to play many roles. And sometimes I used to find myself asking, why am I being invited on this panel or to play this role? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm Black? Am I 2 for the price of 1 because I'm a Black woman? Am I 3 for the price of 1 because I'm Black, woman, and young? Some years ago when I used to be young. So I asked all these questions. But over time, I had to navigate and realize that, you can only do what you can do, and you decide where you feel you can add value, and then you try to do your best in that capacity. Another thing I think when I think about how I was able to do it was being strategic. So I've had to be constantly very strategic about how I use my time every single hour of the day, both in terms of how I use my time within the things I do within my home, and then also within my work as a researcher and at the university or in the research teams that I'm a member of. So in terms of some of the practical things that I did, very early on in life when I had young children, I learned that I had to change my sleeping pattern. So initially I would wake up with my baby or my babies, or it probably was with my first son. So I would wake up and then I would get him ready for school because I find that to be extremely important, being part of the children's daily routine. Starting the day with them, getting them ready for school, something I wanted to do. I didn't want it, farmed out to anybody else. And so I found out that if I did that and then I went to work and then I had to come back, I had to prepare, prepare meals, and then I had to, get them ready for bed. I'm exhausted. And so I found what worked for me, which was that I would wake up very early in the morning, usually around 3 a.m. And a lot of my colleagues still today always tease me because they're like, when are you sleeping? And I'm like, no, this is the way my children trained me. So I would wake up at 3 a.m. and 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is my prime time, the time I get a lot of thinking done, where I get my, new ideas, where I spend, if I have hard tasks I need to think, I need to work on some, some technical things. I do that between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., my quiet time, my time when I'm fresh, my productive time. And then 6 a.m., anyway, it's 3 hours, I need a break. My kids are waking up, I get ready for those chores, I can spend time with them, get them ready for school, and then get them off to daycare or school. And then I go to the office, and then I'm in the office by 8:39. I have another bout of work between 9 and 12. What this means is that by the time it's 1 p.m., I'm usually, have a point of diminishing returns. I can converse intelligently, but I'm not going to do any serious thinking. I'm going to be doing a lot of emails. I'm going to have meetings that are not very taxing on me. I have to organize my day around these activities. And then once it was 7 p.m. when my children were going to bed, I also go to bed. So very early to bed. And that was what I had to do to be able to make it work for me. Now my kids are older, they're more independent. I'm deviating a little bit, but I still have that pattern. I have my morning hours, 3 to 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. That's still my prime time for getting my key deep thinking work done. Other things I had to do was I had to decide what trips I make, when I make them, and how to factor in the children. Do I travel with the children? Do I travel with my mom or a family member so that somebody can take care of the children? Are they old enough for them to go with me for a field trip? So I always have to be juggling how I manage the work and the traveling that I do, because to do field work, to go to conferences, my life and as an academic requires me to travel quite a bit. So the element that has also made this possible is my family. Not only did I have the strong foundation, but I've had the support of my family throughout my career, my husband and my parents, which I probably wouldn't be here today. I just want to give a few examples before I round up my presentation today. This is a picture in 2018, and in the picture is my husband, myself, my two children, my parents, and my parents-in-law, so my husband's parents, all of us together living in our home in East Lansing in 2018 before COVID. So constantly over my career, we've had extended family support with us. Many times, whenever I'm teaching, the semesters that I'm teaching, my mom always makes herself available to help me with the children, particularly when they were young, and sometimes my dad after he retired. So what does that mean is that many of the activities that I consider extremely important, I have someone who can do it the way that I would like it done and allows me to do the things that I need to do for my work, but also somebody who I can juggle with so that I can still be very much active in the life of my children and in the life of the family. Also having parents close to me so that I can be a daughter who meets certain needs that the parents have as they get older. This is some pictures. These are pictures of my mom in East Lansing with my daughter. My daughter loves to bake and she loves to cook, and my son also loves to cook. And they have the opportunity to do this with grandma and grandpa. So you have a picture of my mom and my daughter baking, but also a picture of my dad making a dish called fish cake, which is something that when we were growing up, we loved, made out of sweet potatoes or Irish potatoes and fish. And anytime my dad cooked when we were young, we knew that we would have a scrumptious dish, but we would spend the rest of the day cleaning up the kitchen after he was done. Anyway, he made fish cake with the kids as well. So this is the way the kids can also enjoy time with grandma and grandpa doing things that they love, and sometimes mommy can do it with them, sometimes mommy can't. This is my daughter and my son with me on a field trip. We went to look at some fish farms, fish hatcheries, and we were trying to understand sort of the decisions of the farmers and the hatchery owners about how they get their inputs, how they market their products. And here the kids went with me. Now that they're older, they do this sometimes, and this is part of their learning about what I do, but we can stay together as I do these things. This is grandpa again with my kids playing golf. The kids like golf and grandpa loves golf. Oftentimes, grandpa takes them to golf, both in Nigeria here as well as when we were in East Lansing. Grandpa also does another activity, which we call fun activity, which means homework and lessons on science and math. We call it fun activity to make sure that it's perceived to be fun, but here grandma and grandpa also help with homework. When I'm not teaching and I'm not traveling, I also am engaged in these, but when I'm traveling, I know that I have people that can take on these tasks that I don't want to be missed for me and with me. So it's a community doing it together. Other thing is also the same way I have to be strategic about how I spend my time in the house and in the home, leveraging on my family and my network. I also have to do the same thing with my work. I have to be very particular about what I do, and this becomes more and more a decision as I get higher and higher, and I begin to manage more and more projects and be invited more and more to present or to provide input on issues. So I've had to decide what am I most passionate about? Things like my field work, things like capacity strengthening. So I make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm staying linked to those things. I'm still going to the field. I'm still talking with these farmers and processors and transporters and wholesalers. But I'm also engaged in the things that I really care about. I don't want to lose that opportunity, even as I take on more tasks. What can I delegate to others? That's one that I'm growing in and I'm continuing to learn. Many times we have ideas about how things should be done. And so it can be difficult if others are not doing it the way we want it exactly. And so I've had to grow in learning that I must delegate because I can't do everything, obviously, and I can't even do many things well. So if I want those things done well, I have to develop a team that I work with who can do a lot of the things, and I can then focus on only those things that I must do or only I can do or I need to do in a particular context or team, or that I have the comparative advantage in doing. When must I say no? learning to delegate and learning to say no, those are two things that I continue to grow in, but I've had to begin to do and do more of as I've risen the ranks in my field. The last thing I would say is that I constantly strive to avoid that a life of all work and no play. So as I was rising the ranks, there were a lot of times I paid a lot of time to work. And the one thing I know that I tried to do was to work and the children. Some other people may have suffered a bit, but I tried to make sure work and children. But now I've gotten to realize that no, I have to really carry everyone along. And also I have to make sure I take time for me. And so I do certain things. This is me playing squash. Squash is one of my passions. I try to play squash 3 to 4 times a week. And any day that I start off my day playing squash is the day that I see the difference in terms of how vibrant I am, how much energy I go into my day with. I love word games. I love Scrabble. I love Wordle. Wordle, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I can, get that done. Only one game a day. I love that idea. I spend time doing that. It's time for me just to escape from things and just get some me time. I love to travel. Yes, I love to travel for research and go to the field, but I love to go to new places. Every year, I try to take at least one trip that I take either alone or with a girlfriend and just have some time for personal reflection. I think that this helps me to come back a little bit refreshed, less cranky mom, less cranky wife, hopefully a better scientist, just having some time to just focus on me. So these are some of the tips that I've taken, and I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to the continuing conversation.
Thank you very much, Saweda, for such a conversation with us. Hello, everyone. My name is Mercy Mbogwa, an agricultural economist. I'm also a woman in science. I wanted to interact with Saweda because of her passion to improve livelihoods and to create livelihood opportunities within food systems, especially in Africa. Through her work, which focuses on all nodes of the food systems, including the midstream of the agri-food value chain, which is mostly and largely ignored. And that has also inspired some of the work that I'm doing, focusing on how we can leverage on SMEs, particularly processors for value chain development. And I would like to start by asking you, what are the primary skills to build one's career in science, as well as cultivate effective collaborations with other scientists and colleagues?
Oh, thank you so much, Mercy. Those are excellent, excellent questions. So you asked for you asked for skills, and I think 2 areas, right? One is around being a good scientist, and then the second is around, sort of good collaborator, right? To be a good team member. So with regards to being a good scientist, I think that's an excellent question, because I think that in my field of applied economics or agricultural economics, I've observed certain things when I look at the way in which agricultural economics is treated in Nigeria, where I was trained, how it's being, how it's done in the US and in Europe, for example. So one of the things that I think is extremely important is ensuring that students have a very strong foundation in science and math. Mathematics and science, a very strong foundation in the sciences. When I started working with collaborators in Nigeria as a postdoc, and as I've continued to work with them throughout my research projects over the last 15 to 20 years, I've realized that a lot of times we have students that are very well and knowledgeable about the agricultural side, but are lacking on the skills on the economic side for the field of agricultural economics, which is my field. And so I feel that now many times they have wonderful ideas, but when you come into the field of agricultural economics, if you want to come and do a master's or a PhD and take up a position of an agricultural economist, you really need to sharpen your math and your microeconomics skills. You need to not only know just pure math, but you need to know advanced math, linear algebra, real analysis. There's a lot more math going into the field of economics or applied economics these days. So I think that having a strong foundation in the sciences is really critical. In our field today, I also think having strong writing skills is also very important. Being able to write journal articles. When I started as a PhD student, one of the things my advisor told me, he said, Saweda, you need to learn not to write the way you speak. He said, Africans, you always speak in a very circular way, right? You have to tell a story before you say what you're saying. When you're writing a journal article, you have to go straight to the point. So you have to learn the art of writing. It takes a lot of writing and experience to build it. I think having a strong foundation in writing is also really critical in our field. So I would say math and science, and then also writing. In terms of research collaboration, I think that's a great question. I think in order to be a good collaborator, you have to be a good team player. You have to realize that everyone has something to offer. Sometimes my husband thinks I'm very stubborn, but he knows that I will always ask his opinion because I think that I always can learn from having the opinions of others. I might not accept what you say. I might think that my idea is better, but I know that there's value in hearing the ideas of others. And many times I'm influenced and I change my position when I hear the ideas of others. So I think being a good collaborator means that you need to be willing to listen to the opinions of others. You need to create space to hear the opinions of others. You need to seek it out. So not only just create a platform and say like people can give opportunities, but actually ask, seek out and make sure that people are able to be part of that conversation. Be willing to support, provide constructive criticism. It's not always that, everything, you should speak the truth, but you have to be constructive in criticizing. I think that's important also in being a member of a team and having good collaborations. Be humble and be respectful of the individuals in your team, whether you are the member or the leader. Those are some thoughts.
Thank you very much. In your presentation, you showed how we have a minority of females in leadership and especially in agricultural economics. And that's the case, mostly the case in other areas within agriculture. As a woman leader in science, what strategies have you found effective in navigating and breaking gender barriers in your career?
What strategies? Okay, so I think one thing I will say is that, like I mentioned in the presentation, many times I didn't set out to break any barriers. I was just trying to do what I thought I needed to do. So, and so it wasn't necessarily always a conscious thing. But I think that now that I am a full professor, I am a bit more deliberate about how I look at the generation coming behind me. So if I may talk about strategies, I would say that my strategies were just survival. I was trying to survive. I wanted to be a professor in agricultural economics, and I was just trying to achieve that. But as I went through that process, now I actually am strategic about when I look, I have in most of my research projects, I always have a capacity strengthening component. So I have early career scholars, masters, PhD, and postdocs. And I make sure I look for, women and men. I want to have a diverse group. I deliberately look, and then I try to support them in sort of their trajectories, right? So I'm very deliberate about both men and women. And then, of course, when you have male and female, you need to recognize the differences in their own experiences and challenges that they're facing, their life stage, whether they're young couples, whether they are married, whether they have children. So all of these things affect both men and women, and being cognizant about that and trying to support them to achieve their objectives through that. So I give a lot of advice. I share a lot my story because I think that many women who come after me shouldn't have to do a lot of what I did. They can achieve it in a different way. So I think that that's the way I see, kind of being strategic, is sharing my story and being deliberate about ensuring that I have gender balance and that I'm cognizant of some of the challenges that younger Africans and younger African women are facing as they also try to rise their career. So I mentor a lot of young women, younger African women through this. So this is sort of strategy coming later, not earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. And have you struggled with imposter syndrome at some point, and how did you overcome? And from your experience, how would upcoming scientists overcome the feeling of inadequacy?
Yes. So, that's a good question. I mentioned also in the presentation that a lot of times when you're invited, you ask, right? Why was I invited here, right? Am I here because somebody really wants to hear what I have to say, or am I here because somebody wants to check a box? You know, I've thought about this, and I know that I've discussed this with other minorities, and I know that we all have different opinions. I've gotten to the point now that I just feel like I can speak where I want to speak and share my ideas where I want. And if you invite me and I think I have something to offer and I have the time, and I do it. For young scholars, I would say that, yes, many times we feel inadequate. I've felt inadequate many times as I've risen. And I remember that when I left Nigeria and I came to the US, I could see very clearly the inadequacies, and many of them were actually real. I was not as prepared as some of my counterparts. And so I always tell people I had to go back. When I was doing my master's degree, I went back and I was taking courses in linear algebra and other courses in mathematics, because I knew that I wasn't, maybe I wasn't yet fully prepared to do a PhD. And so I think it's always good for us to be honest with ourselves. But at the same time, also, I think that we don't need to apologize for being who we are. We should be free to be who we are and offer what we have. It can take time, and it's more of trying, and then you see that the world doesn't end. You have to be a bit bold and be ready to make mistakes. You might say something that is not always mind-blowing, but it's something that you think. You have the right to express yourself, and you have to speak up. And many times by doing that is actually how I have gotten the opportunity to be given some responsibilities or to rise in leadership. So yes, we can be shy, and I felt a lot of times, okay, should I speak? I'm young, I'm this. But I think my only suggestion is, yeah, let's push against that feeling. It's difficult. Try it once, and when you see what happens, it most likely will be a good outcome. Even if it's not a good outcome, give it a shot a couple of times. It's easier to say, easier said than done, but I've done it. So I feel like I can say that, try it, and you will find that you will only learn. If you speak something that you think and you've given it some thought, even the worst that will happen is that even if you are wrong, you will learn from it. And so that's okay.
Thank you very much. Lastly, what advice would you give to a young woman in agriculture science who has an ambition to grow in leadership positions?
Okay. So some advices to young women. I think one thing that I would say is, be a good team player. Engage. Don't shy away. When you have something to say, say it. It's similar to what you just asked. I know that it can be hard. One of the things that I try to do is, sort of be a little bit deliberate about, like I mentioned, ensuring that, you have young female scientists, and where possible African women, and giving them platforms to do some of that. So if you have if I have a young scientist that I know is good in a particular field, creating platforms, some of the platforms that I may have access to now that I didn't have as a young person, I invite them to be part of that. I encourage young women to accept such invitations. Don't shy away. Sometimes we want to shy away and we say, oh, maybe I'm not ready. And no, take those opportunities. Be a good team player, but, engage. Another thing I would say is also reach out. So I have, people reach out to me and say, will you mentor me? And I say, yes. And I say, I may not have, so much time, but I'll mentor you, and we'll find time to talk. Reach out to others. Reach out to both males and females. I didn't have a lot of female role models, I mentioned, but I had some very good male role models. My advisor, my major advisor, he was an extremely important role model for me. He believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. My father is also an academic, so he was also an important role model for me. They guided me through. So I would say that young women, let's reach out to other women. young women, we can also learn from each other. Actually, I think I benefited a bit more from peer learning than from having senior women scientists to guide me. So I would say reach out to your peers, reach out to those the senior, always having another person to share their experience with you, their views on things, then you can navigate this space that we're navigating in scientists. There are more women scientists now. Reach out of academia, reach into research institutes like IITA, IFPRI, there are female scientists in CIMIT. So I think if we reach out to each other and we provide, discuss with each other, have forums like this to share our experience and really seek for these, I would say young women, seek for these opportunities and ask questions. So I think those are some things that I would say. Don't shy away from, from leadership opportunities, but also reach out to others.
Thank you very much for the insightful discussion. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And I hope we can talk more about your work.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mercy Bugua, for having this very enlightening conversation with Dr. Saweda, Liverpool-Tasie. So now we would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. We invite you to raise your hand, to turn on your camera, and unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question or comment, or you can submit it via Slido. So we have already have one question at the Q&A box here. So it says, Saweda, thanks a lot for this inspiring presentation. We tend to forget that we are more than the professional dimension. You seem to have a very well-balanced life. Can you share any time in your journey when you were less balanced or less motivated? How do you cope and overcome these moments?
Okay, thank you very much. So, excellent question. So, definitely there were times when I was not very well balanced. And I do this so that I can share about that. So when I in terms about being less motivated, I think one of the things that I would say, I'm going to talk about that short, and then I will spend more time talking about the balance. I think that it's, for me, my personal approach has been to accept that not every day is a good day. That's just life. And so if I have a time that I'm down, it's time I'm down. And as long as I don't stay down, that's the goal. So if you're tired, sometimes I'm tired, I take a day off. I say, okay, you know what, I'm just feeling kind of not motivated. I'm feeling kind of tired. I might take a day off. I might take an afternoon off, or, just, do something else. But the only thing I tell myself is, okay, after a while I say, okay, enough now, let's go, something else. Let's go back. So that's how I handle that. And it's, it comes in many different ways I think that's part of life. But with regards to the balance, I think that's a huge challenge. So when I was giving the story about, kind of my sleeping patterns and all the different ways I have learned to be strategic, these are things that I had to learn as I found myself in these positions. So I found myself with 2 young children under 2 at a certain point. And how do you survive? So that was the time that I was an assistant professor. So I actually, I plan a lot. So that's one thing. I plan a lot, and I'm quite, I've developed skills on multitasking. And so what I do is that, when I was, finding myself just kind of working, then I had to say, no, I cannot, what is it that I'm not willing to give up? I'm not willing to give up the morning time that I'm going to shower and get ready for school. I'm not willing to miss dinner time, right? When you come back from school, or as they get older, I must do those. Even when I travel, I call in the morning before you go to school. I want to talk with them, and I try to call. Sometimes I struggle because of the time difference, but I try to check in every day and make sure that I have some time to know how things are going. So I had to decide at a certain point in time, what must I farm out? What can I do? And what can the different family members do? So early on, I realized that when I'm teaching, it's too much. I can't teach, do my research project management, and do all the things that the department requires. Then I say, Mom, help. And then my mom comes and helps. And then I say, okay, I'm done teaching, and I'm going to need you next year when I'm teaching. Please go and do whatever you want to do with your life so that you can come back when I start teaching again. So I have to plan all this thing. What is my social support system going to look like? My husband has been very supportive. And so that is something that we work out. So we arrange our travel schedules, our work schedules, so that somebody is available, one of us is available. So it's been a slow process of constantly saying, what am I not willing to give up? And how am I going to substitute? Hiring, help to clean, in the house and things like that. So things that I used to do before I got married or when we just got married, I had to say, no, this is what I can continue doing. This is what I cannot do, because I really prioritize these things. Sometimes I prioritize children more than, husband, and then later on I have to come back and then I prioritize now parents. So it's constantly juggling, but trying to balance what are the needs for the different elements of my life and then the work. So that's it's been a constant process of being strategic in how I use my time. That's why I mentioned that one of my reflections is I'm constantly strategizing and planning. How am I going to use this weekend? If I'm traveling and my children are on break, I make sure that when they're on break, I try not to travel. I try to do my trips around that so that if they're on break, I'm here. And if I have to travel, then I'm traveling with them. So it's just a matter of planning. You really need to do a lot of planning around those things that you prioritize. It's difficult, but it can be done. And so far I've managed to do it somehow. I'm still struggling, but I'm still trying, and I just prioritize.
Thank
so that's
you.
a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Considering your rich experience, what matter most to unlock the potential of African women or those in the global South at large?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Considering your rich experience, what matters most to unlock the potential of African women or those in the global South at large? To unlock the potential, what do you think it is the most important?
Okay, so that's a tough one to say the most important. I don't know if I know what is the most important. I can say what I think are some important things. Maybe I'll try that. Some things that I've learned that are very important is creating a space or a platform for women or people from the global South. Many times in the work that I do, because I'm a professor at Michigan State University, it opens up certain doors for me, even in the global South, or even in Nigeria or the places that I work. And so, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I try to do is to create platforms for those younger scientists to have a voice, for their potential to be seen by others, giving them the opportunity to lead within whatever I'm doing. That I think helps to develop their confidence and then also to give them a platform. If you do that in a structured way, then you also don't put them out there before they're ready. So one of the things that I think is really important for scientists from the global South and also women scientists, I think, is having a platform. They're great scientists. Many of them are excellent. They're doing great work, but not everybody knows about them. So I think really giving them a chance to actually speak up and have the opportunity to display what they know, I think, is key. And sometimes also doing it in a deliberate way, because sometimes if you just there should be some preparation for it, I think, so that they don't get blindsided on what they're going to face when they go into different contexts. So I think, just working with them to ensure that they have these platforms and are able to use those platforms well is something that I think is one way. Then, of course, I think providing opportunities for the training I mentioned, having good foundation is critical. I think having good foundations, from my experience in working in like Nigeria and Sub-Saharan Africa, I feel like a lot of opportunities to have strong foundation in math, science is going to be key. And then I think also hearing the stories of others. That's key for unlocking the potential, that people can see that it can be done. In my case, it was not necessarily women, but it was people in my family or friends, others that I saw that showed me that they could do it. They were women, or they were Black, or they were African, and they did it. So that showed me that it could be done. And I hope that when people see me, a young girl from a town in Jos, Nigeria, small town, they can also say that, yeah, you can do it and do much more. So I think also seeing others.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have some comments here. Thanks for your inspiring insights. You are very inspiring. Dear Saweda, for sharing your strategies and your openness. You are amazing. Thanks, Saweda. I love your presentation and frank responses. So would you like to give a final comment, a final advice to conclude the presentation?
I'll just thank you for inviting me. It's been great talking with all of you. I'm looking forward to talking with Mercy. I think we have some joint interests, so I'm going to establish some connections on that. I just want to thank you, and I just think this is a great series. I don't think I have much more advice to give. I think doing this series is even a great way to create a pathway for us women to interact with each other, and for younger women to see women in leadership and hear their stories and be encouraged or inspired by them. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So on behalf of Dr. Brian Govers, Director General of CIMIT, we thank you so much for sharing with us your rich experience, useful advices for women to become a leader, as organizational skills, professional and family time balance, a strategic decision on time use at work, and for yourself as well. The importance of writing skills, math and science foundations, being a good listener, being humble and respectful as a team player, planning and prioritization. So I think there were a lot of recommendations and advices. So thank you for being a successful leader and an inspiration for all. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. So we thank also all the audience for joining today, and invite you to the following seminar, Catalyst of Change, Women Leaders in Science. Let's do a recap of the catalysts we had this year, and stay tuned for more. Thank you so much.
I have a point of view that in all organizations, we talk about diversity and inclusion. They are very critical for driving innovations and success of an organization.
My name is Maria Treiba, and I'm a woman in crop science.
The third and last question that we have is, could you share with us a key phrase that women leaders in science can easily remember?
What I'm hearing you say is the importance of thinking about a solution to various problems that we are facing, especially here in Africa, as it relates to food and agricultural systems.
I am Andrea Gardesal. I am a member of the Women in Crop Science group.
So can you talk about a time when you are faced with a major challenge in your career path?
What do you think is the most critical factor for achieving gender equality and women empowerment in today's society?
In order to get more number of women in science, basically, I feel the focus should be on co-creation. I mean, working together rather than isolation.
So what I wanted to ask you is, how do you think that you can best work together? No? What do you think would be the role, for example, of CIMIT to work with different intersectional partners and different sectors partners?
So my questions will focus on women and the role of women, obviously.
Yeah.
And, my first question is, can you share a tough situation you faced as the head of an academic board and how you handled it?
Being a woman in science can be very taxing sometimes, and it comes with a lot of unique experiences.
My name is Sarah Hearn, and I'm a member of CIMIT's Women in Crop Science group. And I really wanted to interview Sahara because she really speaks to the integration of diversity in science.
I see that one of your pet projects outside of your regular job is co-founding SciMoms.
I think I speak for my colleagues when I say we are really looking forward for the dialogue next, Seeds of Equity. I'm sure you will have a big audience from CIMIT.
I love that, absolutely. I also was back in Mozambique and back in the day, and that there is nothing like seeing people that have been and bravely used their hose and suffered for it. It changes your life.
How do you navigate through this, the traveling and while embracing your identity as a woman, taking note that different parts of the world have different challenges, different culture? How do you deal with that? Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask was also that if you never felt it maybe, or if you don't feel it as much as some other people do, what would you say to them, that how to get over it? It's not as easy, it's easy to say than rather doing it. But then in your opinion, you did touch base a little bit that how do you manage it, but then for other people who do go through it.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series.